As we start this morning, I want us to recite the first part. I'm going to stop you in a little bit, but without looking at your notes, without looking at your Bible, I want us to recite the first part of the Lord's Prayer. We get wise. So if you know the Lord's Prayer, and this is certainly not to embarrass anybody that doesn't, but I have a purpose behind this. If you know the Lord's Prayer, why don't we start saying it now? Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. All right, so can you guess why I did that? Because you saw me leaning in on one part. Debts, trespasses. Which one is it? It really depends on which version of the Bible, which translation, I should say, you're reading. I've heard it debts, I've heard it as trespasses, and I really like both of those for different reasons. We are told throughout Scripture in the Old Testament and in the New Testament so much that we should forgive people. We should forgive those who trespass against us, who cross the line, who might have walked all over us. We are to forgive our debtors, those who have wronged us, those we feel like owe us for what they've done to us. We're told over and over to forgive, and yet we have passages like Psalm 137, verses 8 through 9, that says, "Happy is the one who repays you according to what you have done to us, who dashes your infants upon the rocks." And we have our key text for this morning, in Revelation chapter 6, starting with verse 9. "When he, the Lamb, broke open the fifth seal, I saw underneath the altar the souls of those who had been slaughtered because of the word of God, and because of the testimony which they had maintained out of loyalty to Christ. They cried in a loud voice, saying, O Lord, holy and true, how long now, before you will sit in judgment and avenge our blood on those unregenerate ones who dwell on the earth? Then they were each given a white robe, and they were told to rest and wait quietly for a little while longer, until the number of their fellow servants and their brothers and sisters who were to be killed, even as they had been, would be completed." Now, how do you reconcile a desire for justice with forgiving debts and trespasses? How can we talk about forgiveness and also ask God to bring justice upon those who have wronged us? How can we say we've forgotten about it, but then ask God, don't forget about it? Well, you see, there's kind of the crux of it, isn't there? Because there's a difference between forgiving and forgetting. The Jews who survived the Holocaust, after that, they always used to say, never forget. After 9/11, we used the same phrase, never forget. Always remember what happened. Let me ask you this. If you walk down the hallway, this could be in a school, this could be your place of business, just imagine you're going down a hallway. Every day you go down the same hallway. And every day as you go along the right side of the hallway, this guy jumps out of his room and he just punches you right in the face. Then, over time, when you start going down that hallway, what are you going to do? You're going to dodge it. That's exactly right. You're going to start walking over to the left. You're going to have to learn how to throw up a block. You're going to learn how to do something because you don't want to keep getting punched in the face. Now, did you fail at forgiveness? No. You didn't fail at forgiveness. You might be the most forgiving person in the world, but you've learned how to dodge a punch. You've learned how to throw up a block. So we are not required to forget in order to forgive. What happened to you, the effects might still be with you. It might be impossible. Every time you look in the mirror, you hear a loud noise. There's a sight, there's a sound. There might be some kind of smell. Something triggers a memory. And forgetting might be impossible. But just because forgetting might be impossible does not mean that forgiving is impossible. Too often, though, we hold on to those memories. We hold on, we choose to hold on to certain memories sometimes. And it's one thing for something to pass through your mind, it's another one to hold it there, right? Scripture tells us to hold every thought captive. Sometimes we hold captive the wrong thoughts, don't we? Sometimes we choose to let things sit and dwell in our hearts, and that breeds like weeds. It becomes like a poison that eats away at us. Sometimes, unconsciously, that can cause some collateral damage. Sometimes we make other people pay for mistakes of people that came before them, that don't even have anything to do with them. How many of you have encountered that? That you've paid for the mistake of somebody who was way before you, you never even met this person, but you paid for their mistakes. We can even make others pay for the anger that we hold in ourselves, because we haven't forgiven ourselves about something. And then in anger, sometimes we act out towards other people. Even though Jesus offers forgiveness, and we might be great at forgiving other people, sometimes we struggle at forgiving ourselves. Sometimes we struggle with offering ourselves the same grace we would offer anybody else. We would forgive them over and above for the things that we've done, for the things that they've done to us, but we would forgive ourselves for those same things. So I say all of that regarding forgiving others and even ourselves. As hard as it is to practice forgiveness, and sometimes it's hard to receive forgiveness, as hard as it can be to separate remembering a wrong from just dwelling on it and letting it grow like poison in you, and reflecting that revenge outwardly in your actions. As hard as it is to do all of those things, we are called to forgive. We see Jesus on the cross. What does he say about the people that are putting him on that cross, who are crucifying him? And by the way, that is by extension you and I by our sins. What does he say about those people that are down on the ground? He says, "Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they're doing." And he tells us over and over that we're to forgive. We read that we are to forgive as we have been forgiven. To forgive those trespasses, to forgive our debts. It's in the Lord's Prayer that we just said a moment ago. No matter which biblical translation you read, there's that call to forgiveness as we have been forgiven by God. And elsewhere we read too in Hebrews 12:15, "Keep a sharp eye out for weeds of bitter discontent. A thistle or two gone to seed can ruin a whole garden in no time." And we read, and some of these are in your program, also on the screen. "Don't let the sun go down while you're angry." How many of us have done that? Let the sun go down. Don't point at other people. Don't let the sun go down while you're still angry. "Let all bitterness, wrath, anger, clamor, and evil speaking be put away from you with all malice." And again, Colossians 3:13, "As Christ forgave you, so you also must do." Now, perhaps it would help this morning if I told you the story. In Genesis 37, we read about Joseph. God had great plans for Joseph. And his brothers, Joseph's brothers, frankly, they were sick of hearing about it. They were sick of hearing about God's plans for their brother Joseph. They were sick of the extra attention he got from their father. This is the famous story of the coat of many colors. Say, how come our brother Joseph gets this special coat? How come he gets all the attention? And he always wants to tell us about the plans God has for him. We're tired of hearing about it. So they decide to kill him. And while they're deciding that they're going to kill him, how they're going to do it, their brother Judah steps up. Comes up with another idea. Says, no, let's not kill him. Let's sell him into slavery. So as we read this story, Joseph's story, as he's sold into slavery in Egypt, he eventually progresses. And he gets into much higher position. God uses him in a mighty way. He becomes second in command over all of Egypt. He's second only to the Pharaoh himself. He's basically the guy running everything. Except that Pharaoh seems in the story more like a figurehead, and Joseph is really the one that's in charge. And I'm sure they give him an Egyptian-sounding name and Egyptian clothes, and he looks very different, and time goes on. And Joseph is no longer quite the same guy that he was. He looks different. He's had multiple things that he's gone through in his life. He's gotten some opportunities as well. And God uses Joseph because a famine is coming. And God uses Joseph to plan in advance for this famine, to stockpile food so that they will have enough food to give to those who are in need when the famine hits. And so years pass and the famine hits. And who should Joseph see in the breadline? Those old brothers. And remember, time has passed. He's not the little rascal that he used to be when he was younger. He's grown up now. He looks different. He's probably got all the trappings of an Egyptian pharaoh looking on him. He looks very different than he used to. And again, he's probably going by a different, more Egyptian-sounding job title and name and all of those things. So Joseph, somewhat in disguise, sees his brothers who look somewhat the same come through the breadline. And if there's ever someone you want to get revenge on, it's the people who sold you into slavery. And somehow the fact that it's family, that just makes it so much worse. I wonder how many of you can attest to that there's when it's family that does you wrong, it's so much worse than if it was a stranger. And again, they don't recognize who this man is who's standing there. He doesn't look the same. He's developed mentally and spiritually over time. God has taught him a lot of things. But underneath all those trappings, underneath all the lessons of maturity that he's got, underneath all of that, still that same old wound. Here's these guys come in here with their hand out looking for food. And they're the ones that sold me into slavery. He's got an opportunity here. What's he going to do? And so we have this story, we have this presented, that in between the story of Joseph being sold into slavery and Joseph presented with his opportunity for revenge, in between those two stories, we have another story. The story of one of those brothers, Judah, the one that got the bright idea, now let's sell him as a slave. And it seems a little bit odd. You're in the middle of a story, and then suddenly it stops, and then you hear another story, and then you come back. When you read through the Gospels, when you read through the book of Mark, scholars like to say that when you start a story, stop it, and start another story, and then come back and find a way that they're both related. That's called a Markan sandwich. So when you're in the book of Mark, you have these two stories, and it seems like the second one's not related to the first until you get to the end and say, oh, they were both connected. But that both of those stories hold the same moral, the same principle to them. So because we're talking about Joseph, I'm going to call this a Joey sandwich. But in the next chapter, chapter 38, after Joseph has been sold into slavery, we see Judah moves away from his brothers. He gets married. He has sons. And he arranges a marriage for one of those sons, that his son named He finds him a nice girl named Tamar. But he's not a nice guy. He's a really bad guy. And God kills him. We don't even know what he did, but it must have been so bad it couldn't even put in the words of Scripture, because the next story is pretty bad, and this must be worse. So whatever does, whatever his lifestyle is, he's a bad guy. God strikes him dead. So Tamar is without a husband now. Now the custom of the day was one of the other brothers could marry her and have children through her, and that would continue on the family line for his brother. That wouldn't be considered your child. That would be considered, in a way, your brother's child for purposes of continuing on the bloodline, the tribe, the clan, what have you. So, Judah has the opportunity to marry someone else, to Tamar. He says, all right, next one in line is Onan. Now, Onan's supposed to have a child with Tamar, but he doesn't. He takes advantage of her. He does bad stuff. You just read the passage. And because of the way that he mistreats Tamar, God kills him. God's not very happy with that. So he strikes him dead. Now, you probably heard third time's a charm, right? Third time's a charm. Judah apparently didn't believe that, because he says, okay, I've got a third son. He's a little bit too young for you right now. So why don't you do this? You go live with your father, and when this boy gets of age, then you can marry him. He'll be a younger guy, but you can have the next one in line. But of course, he doesn't have any plans of following through with his promise. It sounds good, it sounds legitimate. He should at least be shaving before he gets married. That makes sense. But he sends her off, and he has no intention of marrying off his third son to this woman. He figures, well, I gave her one of my sons, he got struck dead by God. I gave her another son, he got struck dead by God. I'm not going to give her a third son because what if he gets struck down by God? So what about this is how you blame the victim, right? Tamar hasn't really done anything to deserve this. She's just been given a 1 and a 2, just really horrible husbands. So it's not really her fault, but Judah is kind of blaming Tamar for this. It's not the last time that Judah will mistreat Tamar. So he puts her off to the side, out of sight, out of mind. You just sit and wait at your father's house. When this son of mine is old enough, I'll send him to you. They'll come get you. So by this point in the story, we would say, at minimum, Judah is a liar. He's a trickster. On top of how he lied and he tricked his father when he pretended that Joseph had been killed that day that he sold him into slavery. On top of how he's already done that, now here he is with Tamar. He's a liar and he's a trickster. So one day, Judah is coming into town. He's coming into town where Tamar lives. And Tamar says, this is my chance. She dresses herself in such a way, she covers up part of her face, or he can't see her face, and she covers it up in the way that the prostitutes of the day did. She sits outside of the city gate, which for our context, that would be like that particular street corner, the red light district. This is the place where things like this happen. She goes, presents herself as though she's a prostitute, and she goes to the place where the prostitutes will be. And Judah comes into town, and he sees her and says, I'll take her. And he takes her back, and she says, well, we've got to raise some kind of payment plan. Now, this kind of struck me as odd when I read the story because he puts down a deposit. And I don't know how these things work, but he puts down a deposit. It says, you're going to come back in town, you're going to pay me, but until then, I need some collateral. So I'm going to take your cord, which that was kind of like a necklace, and I'm going to take your walking staff. So, fine, sure, deal. So he sleeps with her, he goes on, and then by this point in the story, the lying, deceiving trickster has been tricked himself. He has no idea that he's just slept with his daughter-in-law, and now she's pregnant. So word comes out that his daughter-in-law is pregnant. He says, wait, she doesn't have a husband. I would know. I was supposed to marry her off. So she did this out of wedlock. She should be burned at the stake. Never mind his indiscretions. He doesn't say, well, I'll pull up the stake right beside her because I'll do this kind of stuff too. Apparently with her. He doesn't do anything like that. He says, oh, she should be burned at the stake. So he summons her, brings her in, and she says, oh, yeah, I did have a baby with somebody. It was the guy who owned this necklace and this staff. Do you recognize any of these? And it's this uh-oh moment for Judah. Now, what he could have done, because remember, he's a pro at lying. He's a pro at being a trickster. This is the part where he could have came in and said, hey, somebody else out there has a necklace just like I used to have. I pawned it off the other day, and I guess the guy who got that, or he has a walking stick a little bit like mine. Or she's lying, she must have stolen. He could have said a number of lies. But what does he do? He says that this woman has been more righteous in this matter than I, because I did not give her to my son Sheila as I had promised. So here he is, he's been lying, he's been deceiving, and I'm not erasing any of that. But here through this story, after he sold his brother into slavery, he's been tricking and deceiving people to get what he wants. Through these circumstances, now we finally see him, maybe not the first time he's ever done it, but the first time we know about it, owning up to his mistakes. He's finally saying, yeah, this is what I did, somewhat publicly. She's more righteous than I am. This person that I said should be burned at the stake, I've called her all kinds of names. She should be burned at the stake. She's more righteous than I am. He's owned up to his mistakes. He's publicly doing this. He's had a real period of growth in his character. And he's been exposed. And all of this happens to Judah before the next time that he sees Joseph. Now, the next time he sees Joseph, Joseph gets a little bit of revenge, which seems fair. After what had happened to him, you can see why Joseph would want revenge. It's not really God's way. But you can understand what happened in his heart to want to do this. He's a little conflicted. You see, in Genesis 43, he welcomes his brothers in. They still don't know who he is. He welcomes them in. He's going to feed them. They're probably wondering, why are we getting all this special kind of treatment? And he's crying over them. Now, I just don't know exactly how much of this is he's crying at the table versus he kind of walks over to the side and cries a little bit. But he's crying over his brothers. This is hurting him in his heart, what they have done, and now he's finally getting to see them. And he's emotional. I haven't seen my family since they did me wrong. And he's emotional about it. And he's going to feed them, and he's going to show care for them. But then he frames them, makes it look like they stole something from him, just so that he can get them back in front of him. And they still don't know he's their brother. They just think this is this high-up ranking official in Egypt. He's the guy really running the show. And here he is, thinks we've stolen something. We are dead. We are toast. And here they are trembling in front of him. He tells them, don't come back here looking for food anymore unless you're going to bring your youngest brother with you. And so when we jump back into the story in Genesis 43, Judah has a conversation with his father, Israel. Judah said to Israel, his father, send the young man with me, and we will get up and go buy food, so that we may live and not die of starvation. We, as well as you and our little ones. I will be security, a guarantee for him. You may hold me personally responsible for him. If I do not bring him back to you and place him safely before you, then let me bear the blame before you forever. So look at what Judah is willing to do here. He's willing to face the possibility of death before Joseph, who he doesn't recognize. Or at least he thinks that he could be put to death. He doesn't know. He faces the risk of alienation from his family, because if this mission doesn't succeed, his father could alienate him. He could lose every connection to his family. He could lose everything. But he says, I'll be responsible for his safety. If anything goes wrong, blame me. Now, Judah hadn't been, up to this point in the story, before now, he hadn't been one to take blame, has he? He'd been one to kind of manipulate people to get what he wants. But ever since Tamar, now he takes the blame. Now he owns up those mistakes. And he says, furthermore, I'll take the blame for this too. Judah has had some real character growth, some real development in his life. And Joseph did not make this change in Judah. Sure, Joseph does a little tricks, a little scheming, trying to get a little bit of revenge. But all of these changes have happened in Judah before anything that Joseph does. God made the change in Judah. Judah got a taste of his own medicine. The trickster got tricked. The deceiver was deceived. The one who sold his brother is now taking care of his brother, no matter what it might cost him. And all of that internal change happened in Judah before Joseph, before he saw Joseph again. It's just that now that this is happening, now that he's in the midst of Joseph's tricks, Judah comes through. Judah starts making the right decisions. Too often we make bad decisions when we're under pressure. And what do we say when we make those bad decisions? When we snap, when we say or do the wrong thing, when we're under pressure, say, I'm normally not like this. I'm not normally like this. This isn't really who I am. You see, Judah, when he's put under these kind of pressures, Judah didn't have a coat of many colors like his brother used to have. But we see his true colors come through now. In Romans 16, verse 17, it says, do not repay anyone evil for evil. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everyone. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Do not take revenge, my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath. For it is written, it is mine to revenge. I will repay, says the Lord. On the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. In doing this, you will heap burning coals on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Now, this wasn't really originally part of the sermon, but just to share a brief aside with you. I used to read this that said you heap burning coals on his head. I thought fiery hot coals, that's a great way to torture somebody, putting it right on their head. That's not what this means. Think about when you see National Geographic specials or whatever, when people are in villages and they're carrying goods across the village. They carry the water jars on their head, right? They carry all kinds of goods, fruits, vegetables, and everything on their head. Now, they keep a fire going outside the tent all the time. You've got to be cooking food all the time or having warmth for your campground. You've got to have a fire going all the time. Now, if you don't have a fire, what's a really good way to light your fire once again? You go over to your neighbor who has a fire, and you take one of their burning coals, and you take it back to your fire and put it in your fire, and now you will have warmth. Now you can have sustenance because now you have fire again. Well, you're not going to carry the fire in your hand, are you? You're going to carry it in something. You're probably not going to carry it like this because what do? You carry it on your head. So when we give people grace and mercy that they don't deserve, it's like the person who has that cold emptiness has been given a little bit of warmth, and you just pile that warmth on them. Yet we might say they carry it in their head, but ultimately it sinks down to their heart. So that's what we do when we give people grace and mercy that they don't deserve, is that we help take some of our warmth so that they can have some warmth. Just wanted to share that briefly aside with you because I think that will help us to see that passage in a new light. That it's not a revenge tactic. It's not, oh, I'm going to put them down on the table and take hot coals. No, it's, I'm going to take some of my warmth and I'm going to give them some warmth. And do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Now, have you ever thought about somebody who's done you wrong? I'll show them. No, you won't. You won't show them. You can't. They cannot see what you have to say if you deliver it with vengeance. Think about it. How convinced are you by the argument of a person who is aiming to hurt you in some way? Probably not very. Have you ever thought, I'll do this, I'll teach them? Will you? Will you teach them, or will you move the focus off of what God is trying to do in their lives and leading them to repentance? And now the focus is on you and how you can move on. How you've allowed their mistakes, whether really big mistakes or really small mistakes, to send you into a rage and to be a person that you'd be embarrassed to see if you could somehow stand outside yourself. You think about if you were to record yourself 24/7, and I know some people do this, they go on YouTube and they stream just about their whole life. If you had a recording of everything you did at the end of the day, would you be embarrassed by the way that you talked to other people, by the way you treated other people? Would you look at that person and say, I don't recognize that person. I see that they look like me, they have the same face, but their face is doing stuff I don't recognize. Their voice is doing stuff I don't recognize. Would you be ashamed of the way that you handle other people? Consider this. God is fair, and He measures out just the right amount of justice. When we try to get revenge, when we try to seek justice, oftentimes we go way too far, don't we? God has in His mind exactly what that person needs that He's going to deal with. He has a plan that should, if they will let it, lead them to repentance, to make things right, to make things reconciled, to fix what is broken. But don't miss this. If you come into the situation and you try to get revenge, is it possible that whatever God might have had in store for them, He might say, oh, this person stepped in now and they've been punished enough because Tom, let's say Tom stepped in and got revenge. So now Sally has been punished enough. I'm not going to do in Sally's life what I was planning on doing because Tom came in and now she needs to recover from what Tom did. She's not going to be able to listen to what I'm trying to do in her life because Tom came in and tried to bring revenge, tried to bring justice. I don't have any room to move now because they're too busy reeling from this counterattack. I'm going to have to come back later. I'm going to have to give my plan B or plan C. And don't misunderstand that God is sovereign and God can move past our mistakes. When we get revenge and all that, God can still move in that person's life. He can still use his plan B, his plan C. But wouldn't it be great if he could just use his plan A because we didn't get in the way? I hope you understand what I'm saying. God is sovereign. God can do anything. But oftentimes we get in the way of God's plans, don't we? We do it all the time. We could even get in the way of God's plan to turn someone's life around because we're too busy worrying about revenge and how it might make me feel better if I could get back at them. And by the way, it won't. Not in the long term. God is the ultimate and best deliverer of justice. And He does it far better than we ever could. When we forgive, it does not mean that justice cannot happen to that person. It means rather we trust God to deliver justice instead of ourselves to deliver some sloppy half-justice that's really just about our emotions. You might feel like getting even, getting revenge, settling the score. It might anger you, that you might feel like the wicked are getting one over on you. You might say it isn't fair. Someone should pay. Someone should pay for what happened to me. Someone should pay for all of these sins. Someone did on the cross many years ago when Jesus died on the cross for their sins as well as yours. And He gave you grace and mercy and expects you to do the same for others. The command to the saints in Revelation chapter 6 is a command also for us. When God tells them, rest and wait quietly for a little while longer until the last of this is over. And if you look at this passage, there's still more persecution that's going to come. There's still going to be wrongdoing to other people too, not just us. There's people that haven't even been born yet. Unless Jesus comes before then, that there will still continue to be wrong done to other people. But we're supposed to wait quietly while Jesus puts a robe around us. It says just a little bit longer. Just a little bit longer. Because God and Jesus is coming back. And justice is coming. Just don't get in its way. Now this morning, if you need to own up to some of your sins, like Judah and say, you know what, I need to own up to this. I need to claim it. I need to say what it is. Today is the day to do that. Don't wait another day. If you need to pray for yourself or for someone else, we invite you to come forward and pray. Perhaps you'd like to join this church in membership. Brothers and sisters standing together, forgetting what lays behind and pressing forward together for what lies ahead. We'd love for you to join this church this morning. Whoever the Lord leads, we invite you to come forward during this final song.